in their families. I know some of you in this room have perfect families, right? You have your mom and dad are June and Ward Cleaver, and you had a great, perfect home. And if you had a family like June and Ward Cleaver, you probably need therapy today. I'm kidding. I'm glad you have those kind of parents. But there really is no such thing as perfect parents, just like there are no perfect children and there are no perfect siblings. You didn't miss out on something because none of us had a perfect family. So the only way families hold together is if we learn how to forgive one another. And that is what Joseph's family had to learn. Now, Abraham and Sarah, you remember, they had 2 sons. Abraham had 2 sons. Ishmael was the first. And when Ishmael was about 10 or 11 years old, Sarah became really jealous of Ishmael's role in Abraham's life. She had a son named Isaac, and she sent Ishmael away, never to come back again. And that's a pretty sad story, right there about a family. Now, Ishmael later became the father of a great nation, Islam. Then Isaac and Rebekah had 2 children, Esau and Jacob. And what Isaac had learned from his father's behavior and from his mother's behavior, you always pick out a favorite. And so Isaac learned he could pick out a favorite, and his favorite was Esau, the firstborn of the twins. And Rebekah favored Isaac, the secondborn of the twins. They each had their favorites. They were always vying with one another for who was going to get the most for their favorite child. Can you imagine how confusing that must have been growing up in that family? And then Jacob gets married. Actually, he intended to marry Rachel. He fell in love with Rachel. She was beautiful, and he fell in love with her. He paid the dowry and was ready to marry her. And on the wedding night, the woman behind the veil was actually Leah, not Rachel. It was her sister, Leah. Boy, can you imagine how confusing that would be after you wake up after your wedding day and you find the wrong partner lying next to you? Biblical marriage. So Rachel's father had a plan to give Rachel to Jacob if he worked just a little bit longer and paid a bigger dowry. So Jacob married both Rachel and Leah. One he loved and one he didn't love. And the only way to earn the love that Leah believed was by having children. So Leah could have children. Rachel couldn't have children. So Rachel gives her maidservant to Jacob so that he could have children by her maidservant. You following so far? And then Leah gets in the act and wants to have more children, and then she gives her maidservant to Jacob. So he had 4 wives and 13 children. Talk about a confusing family. Enmeshed. And it was challenging. And they may have been founding figures of our faith, but they were not perfect. And what we find out is Jacob has a favorite child. Out of all of his 13 children, his favorite was Joseph, his son, by Rachel's maidservant, because it was considered Rachel's son, the one he loved. He loved Rachel, so he loved the firstborn. He learned this from his parents, who learned it from their parents. You see how this happens from generation to generation. We pass on our brokenheartedness, we pass on hurt and pain from generation to generation. Joseph was the favorite. He was favored in so many ways. He got special treatment. All the other children were told what a special child Joseph was. When he turned 16, he got a special gift over all the other children. All the other children got Chevettes, and he got a Corvette. Actually, what he got was a beautiful multicolored robe. And in the midst of that, he grew up feeling that he was extra special. And not having the maturity and the character, he told everybody that he was extra special. He told his brothers how extra special he was, and he was his father's favorite, which made all of his brothers feel about this big. Maybe not even that big, maybe this big. So there was a lot of animosity in that household. Now, what comes to pass in Joseph is that he keeps having these dreams that God has given him, and one of those is a vision of the future where his brothers are going to bow down before him. And he doesn't really know what this really means, but he takes it as that he is really special. I am so special, and you aren't. And of course, what does he do? He tells his brothers all about this dream and about how great he is and how they're not. So one day, his brothers have had it. They're fed up with this. This really, really, really stinks. And Dad doesn't love us. We don't know our moms. We don't know even if our moms love us. We do know that Dad loves one of us. He loves Joseph. Joseph is so arrogant and just so full of himself. And the anger keeps building and building and building until they're out in the fields, and one day Joseph approaches and they decide, we've got to get rid of him. We're going to kill him. And then one of his brothers says, hey, let's not kill him. Look over there, the Midianites are buying and selling people as slaves to Egypt. Maybe what we could do is we'll just make some money on this deal. We'll sell Joseph, we'll get some money, and maybe they'll buy him from us. And then we can go back and we can tell Dad that we were out and a wild animal got him. So they sold Joseph, they got some money, they took Joseph's beautiful coat, tore it into pieces, and they dipped it in goat's blood and went back and told their father what had happened, that Joseph was eaten by a wild animal. But we know that he ends up in Egypt, and he serves as a slave, and then he's going to go to prison because his brothers sold him out. We don't know how many decades he was a slave or how long he had been in prison. There are decades of animosity and pain and hurt that are captured in this story that tells us of the first biblical mention of forgiveness. So we're going to come back to this story at the end of this sermon, at the end of the message, and see how it is resolved. But what I'd like to do now is take you back to where we have been these past few weeks. We've been talking about forgiveness. Forgiveness can be defined in a myriad of ways. Two-thirds of Jesus' teaching is directly or indirectly related to forgiveness. Others have said forgiveness is to let go of our hope for a different or better past. Does that make sense? Forgiveness is to let go of our hope for a different or better past, to look back and say, and hang on to it and hope that it's different. Instead, it is what it is. Acceptance leads to great freedom as long as there is accountability and healing in the process. One dimension of forgiveness and healing happens in here, in your heart. choosing in your heart to let go and let God. If you don't, it's like drinking poison and expecting the person that hurt you to die. You have to forgive. You do not have to extend pardon, though, to the other person to actually communicate that. You have to love your enemies, those who persecute you, those who hurt you, the Bible says, but you just need to pray for them. But the love, and that love, the love of an enemy, is not some warm, fuzzy feeling, and it's a way of acting intentionally to do the right thing towards others. You don't have to communicate the pardon. If you can, great. If you can, great. You can bring healing to the other person. You show grace from God. But in some situations, the very act of granting pardon enables the person to go back and continue doing the same thing over and over again. It's not always required that we say, "You are forgiven." It is always required, though, for us to learn to let go and let God. We've talked about the wounds we have experienced and the wounds we have afflicted in others as stones. We've had this picture of having a backpack representing our soul, and we carry these stones around with us in our backpack. When we hold on to the wrong that has been done to us, we carry them and we feel the weight of them. And we described the kind of stones. We had the small stones. We had the small things. In life, there's the small things. They're the kind of day-to-day things that happen in our lives, where other people wrong us. And when it comes to families, let me give you a couple examples. These can be words that are said in the heat of the moment that shouldn't have been said. We all know we didn't really mean that. Sometimes they're bad moods. We did something we shouldn't have. But they are small. They're small stones. We can easily forgive them. Sometimes they're just irritants. And we can let them go. Like when a mother comes over to your house, you just recently married. She comes over to your house for the first time and has dinner. And she notices that your toilet paper is rolled from the bottom. And she goes around to all the bathrooms and turns it so that it's rolled from the top. Now that's a small stone. But when you're going around and changing them all back, it might not feel so small. But we got to let those things go, right? What we do with this stuff, what do we do with all of this stuff? All these small things between parents and siblings. You can say, I'm going to hold on to all of it, and we can put them all in the backpack. We could put all those small things into the backpack. My grandmother could have held on to that lipstick she lost when my mom blamed beauty. She could hold on to the toilet paper that got re-rolled in a different way. We could hold on to those things. We could do with this stuff. You can say, I'm going to hold on to it, and never ask for forgiveness. I'm going to be irritated forever. And then the trouble is that you start acting like those small things are medium-sized things. And they build a wall. You're starting to build a wall. You're starting to get so heavy They never asked for forgiveness. My mom never asked for forgiveness. I'm going to be irritated forever for these things. The problem is, you start carrying this around. Within a year or even a few months, these small things become a full backpack, and you're lugging it around with you. But they're all small things. You just weren't willing to let them go. If you're going to have any kind of relationship with family at all, we've got to learn that this may irritate me, but I'm going to let it go. So how do you do this? How do you do this with the small things? Some are really, really irritating. So here's my suggestion. I encourage you to wrap. I mean, not rap, but wrap. When one of these irritating things happens between siblings and parents and children, first R, and it's written on that little card. You have a little card. It's ways to let go and forgive. R. First thing is to remember your own shortcomings. Name at least 5 things people would be irritated about you. What are 5 things? Next time somebody does something irritating, think about the 5 things that could possibly be irritating about you. And A, assume the best in the other person. It's actually healthier to use the toilet paper from the top of the roll. Assume your mom knows it's healthier, she had the best interests in mind, or whatever it might be. P, pray for God's blessing. Pray blessings on your mom or your dad or your child. And remember, wrap for the small things. You may do this with your jaw clenched. You may not feel it when you pray it. But if you keep wrapping, you keep praying, you will find over time that your heart softens. And you wonder, why was I so upset about this? You can come to a place where you can just let these small things go. Just let them go. That's wrapping. But it's the larger things that we have a harder time forgiving. The other person hasn't asked forgiveness. And part of the key for the medium-sized stones is that the other person repents, says they're sorry, acknowledges it. I know that I hurt you. That makes it so much better. But you don't always get that. The other person may not believe that they did anything wrong. They may not even be aware what they've done. They may think they're in the right. But the medium-sized stones are when other people say things that you can't brush off after a few minutes. Not even wrapping for a long time. It could be that you were ignored, you were made to feel not as important as your siblings. In Jacob's case, he loaded up his kids' backpacks with medium-sized stones, right? Giving a special coat to Joseph. But when you pile all of this medium-sized stones, a wall is built with all those medium-sized stones that you have been piling on between yourself and your family. There are 2 ways to break down that kind of a wall. One, the other person comes to understand what they have done and makes amends. It's important to be able to talk to people in a way that doesn't cause them to be defensive, so that they can share. So you can share with them. I feel when you fill in the blank, I feel because. Or if the other person doesn't make amends, you find a way to let go Let the hurt go. You have an opportunity to say, these stones are not worth having no relationship with my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother. They aren't worth having no relationship with my child. You can build those stones, you can hold them up, you can fill it up. You can build the walls and you can carry them around. You can just keep doing what you've been doing. The challenge is this thing can get awfully heavy over time, or you need to learn to forgive. These are your options. If we keep carrying this stuff around, these medium-sized stones, if you have enough of them, you become a hunchback. You become someone you don't even recognize anymore because of all the stones you're carrying around. Wrapping does help with these. It helps with the medium stones. But there's other things that might help you let go, and that is the addition of an S to wrap. Wraps. Here we are seeking to understand the other person. It begins to help. We are like icebergs. All of us here are like icebergs. We can only see part of what's happening in anybody's life. We can only see a small portion of what's happening. But underneath, a lot is going on. The father who speaks a harsh word to his daughter, maybe he's doing a great job. As a child, his father locked him in a closet for hours. Does it still hurt understanding that? Yeah, it still hurts. It didn't make it okay. Doesn't make it okay. But you're able to understand. Be able to understand, to say he did the best he could with what he had at that time. We learn how to parent from our parents, right? It isn't enough just not to do what our parents did, but to find freedom to choose another way. Abraham passed medium-sized stones to Jacob, who passed medium-sized stones to Joseph. But the reaction to all those medium-sized stones was a huge stone that the brothers placed on Joseph, that the brothers laid on him. It was actually going to be a tombstone. This is something you don't just forgive. Joseph, your brother sold you, and you don't just say, I forgive you. How do you let go? These stones are so large. They're so hurtful. You can't carry these by ourselves. Most of us haven't experienced that kind of stone or that kind of rock, that kind of hurt in our life. Thank God for that. But I'm guessing there are some of you who have in your family experienced and carried around a stone like that. If we can learn how people can carry these kinds of stones around and forgive, it will help all the rest of us to help us learn how to forgive and love. Most folks who have that kind of hurt, that kind of stone, find someone to help them carry this stone in the form of psychotherapists or counselors and friends who slowly help them let go. One woman described how she needed to write down her feelings to a parent who abandoned her. She said the very act of writing the letter and sending it was like lancing a boil. In 12 Steps of AA, many look for ways to bring something good from their pain. When they asked that God use it for good in their lives and they began to help others, their pain had meaning. And they could thank God not for the inflicting pain, but for the opportunity to use it. You cannot heal what is not acknowledged. When you do not consciously acknowledge, it will remain. What's not acknowledged will remain in control from within, festering and destroying you and those around you. Joseph doesn't kill his brothers. Instead, he says, I can see now what you intended for evil, God intended for good. Look what God did with what you did to me. Look what God did. And now I'm in a place when his brothers were in trouble and could have been killed and imprisoned. Joseph was now in a place to save them. You can choose to harm everyone because you were hurt, or you can choose to harm no one because you were hurt. Either way, it is a choice. It is so easy to fall into the trap of victimhood, but God gives us the capacity for love and forgiveness, and when we use that gift, it fills our lives with joy. It is impossible to feel resentful for those who do not have the same joy in their lives. Storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? Would you pray with me the prayer that is on the card? I'll find my card. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen.